Hi guys. Today topic it's about the dimensions of culture. In specific, we will discuss two different cultural dimension framework, Hofstede and Globe. There are two learning objectives in this topic, and I hope that by the end of this topic, you should be able to first summarize the dimension developed by Hofstede, who categorized national culture in 6 dimensions. And second, takes the notion of cultural dimension a stage further by considering the more recent projection of cultural dimension by the Globe Project. Before we start with the first learning objective, we will first outline a model of value orientation, which drawn from social anthropology that has proved to be influential in the development of a dimensional approach to cross-cultural comparison. This table shows the variation in value orientations. It suggests that a particular cultural grouping will display a certain orientation to the world in response to the question relating to those given in the table. It does not claim, however, that all individuals within a particular grouping will respond in the same way. Moreover, it does not account for so-called subcultural groupings or for the way organizations in a particular cultural environment respond to the questions. Nevertheless, it does enable a comparison to be made along certain variation or different cultures. Moreover, the model also proved to be the source of inspiration for many other researchers into cross-cultural matters, including Hofstede, which we will discuss shortly. This value orientation influenced not only attitudes to work, but also to other concerns in daily life. Hofstede research in the area of culture and management is known worldwide. His theories are not only frequently quoted and applied in cross-cultural research, but also used in prescriptive work on dealing with other cultures. Hofstede developed a dimensional approach to cross-cultural comparison through his pioneering studies into how management is affected by differences between cultural groupings. He conducted extensive study into national cultural differences, the first being across employees working in subsidiary of a multinational corporation, which are IBM in 64 countries. Hofstede, the personnel research department of IBM Europe, took a database of scores resulting from attitude surveys among IBM employees worldwide and reanalyzed the figures. The survey had been developed as a management tool to examine issues relating to work situation. The original respondents in this survey were matched grouped in 7 occupational categories, 5 of them being non-managerial and 2 managerial. Hofstede used the result of his research to produce a comparison between cultures of 5 dimensions as shown in this slide. Power distance, collectivism versus individualism, uncertainty avoidance, femininity versus masculinity, short-term versus long-term orientation. Power distance refers to the extent to which members of a culture expect and accept that power is unequally distributed in society. It was developed by Hofstede on the basis of earlier research concerning preferences for power among different cultures, and in particular on research identifying centralization as a characteristic of organizations. In society characterized by a high power distance, authority is usually centralized and autocratic, clearly distinguishing between leaders and followers, with both parties endorsing such level of inequality. Hierarchy is normal and accepted. There is an emotional distance between individuals believed to be at different social levels. People depend to a large extent on power holders. Subordinates are not empowered and are expected to take orders and not to act or think independently. They refrain from expressing disagreement and accept to comply without questioning the situation. Power holders are entitled to special treatment, are not usually approachable to their subordinates. On the other hand, societies characterized by low power distance promote independence and individual empowerment. Authority is usually decentralized and democratic. Unfairness is not tolerated, and members of low power distant societies make great effort in order to achieve social harmony and cohesion. On the other hand, a high level of personal accountability is expected. In low power distant cultures, it is common for juniors, whereas in terms of either age or rank, to question and challenge the authority, since critical thinking is encouraged from an early age. Leaders are more likely to consult and guide rather than they are to impose. The social structure is flat and great emphasis is placed on the importance of equal rights and opportunities. Examples of high power distant cultures are the Arab world, the most Latin American countries, most Asians and African countries, and some European countries, such as France and Poland. Whereas, examples of low power distant cultures are English and German speaking countries, Scandinavian countries, and some Latin American countries such as Costa Rica. The individualism collectivism dimension concerns itself with the relationship between the individual and the group. To what extent are individuals in society autonomous, and to what extent are they embedded in the group? In the collectivist society, the group takes care of individuals. Individuals are loyal to the group, such as family, extended family, tribe, organization, and so on. We is prioritized over I. The well-being of group is more important than individual pursuit. People strive to preserve harmony and to respect hierarchy within the community. Everyone is likely to practice self-control, since they are fully aware of the impact their words and actions have on others. Self-concepts are based on social roles rather than personal traits, such as I am a good son as I am someone's son, a role in a group. Selflessness and conformity are highly valued. Individual achievements are often portrayed as a result of external circumstances rather than personal merit. Whereas in individualistic society, focus in on personal priorities and self-realizations. People value freedom and individual achievement. Individualistic culture are usually doing culture. They are structured, they prioritize task outcome over relationship, they stress the importance of getting things done and being productive. Self-concepts are based on personal trait rather than social role. For example, I am kind, I am intuitive, I am self-achievement. Independence and self-reliance are important. People are expected to take care of themselves and a few loved ones, and to take responsibility for their own achievement and failures. Individualistic society are generally guilt-based because they have to take responsibility for everything that they do. Confrontation is accepted, and people are encouraged to express their opinions and to be assertive. Work is often seen as a key factor to happiness in terms of pleasant feelings, satisfying judgment, self validation. Moreover, happiness is reserved for those who are successful or perceive themselves as such. Next, we have collectivism versus individualism. Collective cultures, including but not limited to most Latin American, Southern European, Middle Eastern, Asian, African countries, tribal communities around the world. Whereas individualistic cultures, including most Western societies, English German speaking countries, Scandinavian countries, and other Central and Northern European countries. Uncertainty avoidance refers to the degree to which members of a specific culture are comfortable with uncertainty and unpredictability. Low uncertainty avoidance societies are usually high in diversity. People are unlikely to be ostracized for holding conventional belief. Masculinity and femininity dimension. Masculinity is a preference in a society for achievement, heroism, assertiveness, and material rewards for success, whereas femininity represents a preference for cooperation, modesty, caring for the weak, and quality of life. Masculine cultures can be found in most English, Anglo-American cluster and German-speaking country, Germanic Europe cluster, with the exception of the Netherlands. In some of the countries that belong to the Confucian Asian cluster, such as China, Japan, and Hong Kong, in the Latin American cluster, such as Argentina, Colombia, Ecuador, Mexico, Venezuela, in some Mediterranean countries, such as the Latin Europe cluster, but with the exceptions of France, Portugal, and Spain. Feminine cultures, on the other hand, seem to be the norm in most African countries, in Northern European countries, and in most of these countries that form the Southern Asia cluster. What are the main differences between masculine and feminine cultures, which is also defined as a tough, tender culture? Let's find out. Masculine cultures are ego-driven and highly competitive. Social status matters. Money and material possessions are important. Strength and power are admired. Long hours culture, hierarchical corporate structures are the norm. Workers are motivated by specific targets, individual or collective, and by being able to show what they have achieved. Gender roles tend to be clearly defined. The gender wage gap is usually higher in masculine societies. The family structure is traditional. Fathers deal with facts, whereas mothers deal with feeling. Boys are encouraged to stand up for themselves and to fight back. Girls are expected and allowed to cry and to display emotion. Children are controlled by obedience and expected to perform at high standard. In feminine societies, gender roles are not clearly defined and there are little or no gap between perceived male and female values. Individuals of both genders tend to be more cooperative than competitive. Quality relationships are a priority. Conflict is resolved by compromising and negotiation rather than by open confrontation. Feminine cultures are equality and values driven. Both boys and girls are encouraged to show their emotion. Personal time and balance between family and work are very important. Parents lead by encouraging dialogue and by setting a positive example. Weak members of the society are treated with empathy and supported by collectivity. High uncertainty avoidance cultures include most of the countries in the Latin, Eastern Germanic Europe cluster, Latin America and Middle East cluster, and some cluster in the Confucian Asia cluster, such as Japan, Taiwan, South Korea. Whereas low uncertainty avoidance cultures include most of the countries in the Southern Asia, Nordic Europe, Anglo-American cluster. The uncertainty avoidance score for the Sub-Sahara Africa cluster is in the mid-range, but according to the Globe study, this society desire to have more uncertainty avoidance, that is, relying on social norms, rules and procedure to elevate unpredictability. Members of high uncertainty avoidance culture tend to plan everything meticulously and to rely on rules, law and regulation in order to avoid uncertainty and unpredictability. Level of stress and socially anxiety are usually high. Life is perceived as stressful and often hectic. Tradition matters. Social interaction are often formal and conservative. Decisions are based on consensus. High uncertainty avoidance societies are generally low in diversity, while in some high uncertainty avoidance culture, those in the Latin European cluster, for example, the display of emotion is acceptable, whereas some other societies, for example, those in the Confucian Asian cluster, value emotional control and self-restraint. Whereas for low uncertainty avoidance culture, they tend to rely on informal rules and norms and feel relatively comfortable in unstructured situations. Some risks are somewhat expected in all areas of life. Life is not perceived as intrinsically stressful. Emotional balance and composed behavior are considered the norm. In low uncertainty avoidance societies, they generally little resistant to change. People are more open to innovation and novelty, as well as highly likely to adopt a flexible approach to the truth, which is seen as relative. Last, we have short-term versus long-term orientation. Those values deemed short-term in nature are oriented towards the past and present, as well as are more static, whereas those deemed to be long-term are oriented towards the future and are more dynamic. Short-term orientation includes fostering virtues related to past and present, especially respect to tradition, preservation of faith and fulfilling social obligation, whereas a long-term orientation includes fostering virtues oriented towards the future, especially perseverance and thrift, ordering relationship by status and having a sense of shame. Now we're going to discuss another work using dimension is the Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness Research Program. In short, the GLOBE project. GLOBE is a long-term program divided into 4 phases designed to conceptualize, operationalize, test and validate a cross-level integrated theory of the relationship between culture and societal, organizational, and leadership effectiveness. The GLOBE project groups the societal cultures object of the study into 10 major culture clusters and characterized by 9 cultural dimensions. As can be seen from the left picture, it shows the 10 major clusters in the world: Eastern Europe, Germanic Europe, Nordic Europe, Latin Europe, Anglo, Latin America, Confucian Asia, Southern Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Middle East. The picture on the right shows the globe cultural dimension, which some actually overlap with Hofstede cultural dimension. So we have first power distance, second uncertainty avoidance, third institutional collectivism, fourth in-group collectivism, fifth gender egalitarianism, sixth assertiveness, seven future orientation, eight performance orientation, and last number nine human orientation. Here we have some comparison for all 9 dimensions according to cluster. We can see which cluster actually have high score and low score in the 9 cultural dimension. Now, let us visualize based on an example according to the globe cultural dimension and cluster. With regard to the leadership style, what are some of the possible challenges an executive coming from the Anglo cluster is going to face when managing a local team in the Confucian Asian cluster? So we have 2 clusters here, Anglo cluster and Confucian Asian cluster. An executive coming from the Anglo cluster will most likely value competitiveness, performance, and will prioritize the achievement of an organizational goals over harmonious relationship. Whereas local workers in the Confucian Asian cluster will be more concerned with cooperation, consensus, and with the need to maintain social harmony. In a scenario in which objectives are not met, a negative feedback session or negative performance evaluation might ensue. Someone who comes from a society where guilt is the main tool of social control may not be fully aware of the implication of standard negative feedback delivered to someone who comes from a shame culture. So, how is this story going to end? We will discuss further about this in the next topic in the following weeks. So far, we have covered both cultural framework in terms of cultural dimension, Hofstede and the globe. So, we have 5 dimensions from the Hofstede cultural dimension, whereas we have 9 dimensions under the globe project. So, that's all for now. Thank you and see you in the next topic. Bye.